The European Union's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, on Wednesday said that Russia is not ready for a peace deal despite ongoing negotiations sparked by a plan from US President Donald Trump. Right now, we see zero indication that Russia is ready for a ceasefire. Russia is not winding down its military machine, but ramping it up, she said after a meeting of the foreign ministers of the 27 EU nations in Brussels. According to Associated Press, she said pressure on Russia, like more sanctions and seizing frozen assets, are needed to push Moscow to the negotiation table. We still need to get from a situation where Russia pretends to negotiate to a situation where they need to negotiate. The Commission has proposed transferring to itself ownership of the assets. Then the Commission under von der Leyen's leadership could issue a loan to Ukraine to be repaid only if Moscow gives war reparations for Kiev. Kallas said that there was broad EU support for Belgium now and that we need to make this decision fast, to send the strongest message to Moscow that it cannot wait us.
An immediate and unconditional ceasefire must be the first step to ending the war, but right now we see zero indication that Russia is ready for a ceasefire. Russia is not winding down its military machine, but ramping it up. We still need to get from a situation where Russia pretends to negotiate to a situation where they need to negotiate.
Vitaly.
It was very high level of engagement Russian side on preparations.
To secure the best outcome for Ukraine and Europe, we have to stay the course but pick up the pace. This means more sanctions to deprive Russia of the means to fight and more military and financial support to Ukraine. In the European Council, we pledged to cover the financial needs for Ukraine for 2026 and 2027. And there are, of course, several options on the table, as you know, but the reparations loan is the most clear-cut way to do this. It would send the strongest message to Moscow that it cannot wait us out, and we need to make this decision fast.
Conclude. Good afternoon.
Mass inspections of freight shipments on Russia's border with Kazakhstan have halted a significant share of imports and could soon lead to shortages of consumer goods. Logistics and freight forwarding companies estimate that between 10% and 25% of all consumer imports from China are now stuck at the border. Recall, Kazakhstan has shut down one of Russia's most important land borders, freezing thousands of trucks and exposing just how dependent Moscow has become on its neighbors' transit routes. What began as a routine customs inspection has escalated into a full-scale collapse of Russia's logistics system, with shortages and losses already spreading across factories and warehouses, RFU news media outlet says. The border closure started with tightened Kazakh inspections of trucks coming from China, but within days, the situation turned into a complete halt. More than 5,000 vehicles are now stuck at checkpoints, forming queues stretching for kilometers. Drones, electronic components, batteries, tools, clothing, and basic consumer goods are all blocked. Some trucks have been waiting for weeks, while others have been waiting for months, and Russian companies report multi-million losses as shipments spoil or contracts fail. Even Kyrgyz drivers, fully dependent on Kazakhstan's territory for access to Russia, have been stranded with no route forward. Trucks heading for Astrakhan, Orenburg, Novosibirsk, and the Volga regions are being stopped by the same bottleneck, and Kazakh customs are refusing to let cargo cross without a thorough check, effectively shutting down the border, RFU News reports. Kazakhstan says the reason for the border shutdown is secondary sanctions, as for 2 years, the fall in official EU-Russia and US-Russia trade has been almost matched by a rise in trade between Russia and Kazakhstan. Astana knows that Western governments can see those numbers and know what they imply, that Kazakhstan became one of Russia's key channels for sanctioned goods. From electronics to dual-use components. Now the warning signs are too loud to ignore, as Kazakh officials insist the inspections only target less than 1% of vehicles, but they explicitly mention dual-use items and prohibited cargo. And the timing matters, as Kazakhstan's Ministry of Finance has been upgrading its customs system with help from USAID, signaling that Astana intends to comply with the Western sanctions. In that environment, letting thousands of trucks move unchecked into Russia is no longer a risk the Kazakh government is willing to take. For Russia, the consequences are severe, as every delay pushes the factories closer to shortages because the border with Kazakhstan is one of Russia's main routes for Chinese goods, everything from drones and commercial electronics to machinery and spare parts. Warehouses are running low, retailers cannot restock, and producers dependent on foreign components face production cuts, RFU News says. Even Russia's attempts to blame its own customs officials cannot hide the broader reality that the Kremlin does not control the flow of goods into its own economy. Moscow was forced to issue an emergency decree simplifying procedures for Kazakh and Kyrgyz trucks, extending their allowed stay in Russia, and clearing backlogs manually. That intervention reduced delays temporarily from 2 weeks to a few days, but as soon as new cargo flows arrived, the queues returned. Repairs at Kazakh border posts, seasonal demand spikes, and new restrictions on car imports have added to the chaos, but none of these factors explains the collapse as clearly as the political one, with Astana enforcing sanctions while still trying to trade with Russia on favorable terms, RFU News says. Kazakhstan's border shutdown exposes one of Russia's deepest vulnerabilities, an economy that depends on a neighbor it cannot pressure, control, or bypass.